Ex-homeless Redditors. What was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? I was homeless back when I was 19. After a few weeks of sleeping rough, I was approached one evening by a man dressed as a priest. At this point, I had no idea if he was a priest or someone out to deceive me. Being wary of the priest outfit, I straight away told him I have no interest in talking about God. What he said next has stuck with me ever since. I am not here to talk about God. I'm here to make sure you are safe. We talked for quite a while until it was dark, and that's when he offered me a bed for the night. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but he had seemed genuine, so I went with him. He drove me to a house in the suburbs and asked me to wait in his car whilst he spoke to someone. A few minutes later, he returned with another man who offered to let me sleep in his garage for the night. Everything inside of me was saying, this is a bad idea, but I accepted it as I felt like I had nothing left to lose. The garage was pretty standard. Tools, workbench, etc. Except in the corner there was a box spring and some blankets. There was a connecting door to the main house that the man told me he would have to keep locked during the night. He apologized, but he said he had kids in the house and couldn't take the risk. The priest asked if he could come by in the morning and speak to me, then went into the house with the man. I don't think I slept at all that night. I was terrified. I had no reason to be afraid of either man, as they had been nothing but nice to me. However, after living on the streets for a while, you come to learn that nothing comes for free and you shouldn't trust anyone. The morning rolls around and the most amazing thing happened. The man knocked on his own garage door to ask me if he could come in. This might not sound amazing, but when you've actually been living rough with zero privacy, someone asking if they can enter your space, which is actually his space, gives you a sense of being human again. Someone actually respects you enough to ask for your permission. I spoke with both him and the priest every day for the 7 weeks I slept in his garage. Between them, they managed to get me into a subsidized efficiency apartment. Think studio apartment, but a lot smaller. And got me a job and helped me get my life back on track. That was over 20 years ago, and I will always be indebted to both of them. I still send Christmas cards to the man whose garage was my home and visited him 2 years ago for Thanksgiving. Sadly, the priest passed away a few years back, but I guarantee that if there was a heaven, he got fast-tracked in. I have a feeling a lot of the stories we're going to read here are not going to be the happiest. So to start out with such a heartwarming one, I feel incredibly lucky. For the rest though, everyone strap in and get ready. Story 2. Snow. I'm a big scary dude, so I never had trouble with people picking on me or whatever. And in that sense, the streets were safe to me. But seeing snow for the first time that year just made me cry and panic. It was too early for snow. I wasn't ready for that type of cold. And I was hoping to be back on my feet again before the winter came. A beautiful thing like snow just screwed me up in so many ways. Story 3. Waking up to a shotgun being pointed directly at my head. I wasn't truly homeless, but had no money or bank card, and was trying to get back to my parents following nearly being strangled to death by my ex. The actual fight happened whilst we were out, so I had no spare clothes and I'd left my wallet at his place, and only had a dying phone on me. I tried getting money for a train, but only really managed enough for bus fare, and so I decided to try hitchhiking. Late into the night, I gave up and managed to sneak into a barn where I was able to get comfortable enough to sleep. Turns out I didn't close the door enough, and the farmer found me in the morning after taking his gun to investigate. He woke me up, I think he coughed loudly, with the gun pointed at me. I nearly crapped myself. He asked me what I thought I was doing in his barn and quizzed me on how I got in. He asked to see my arms before he lowered the gun and he started chatting. He was quite nice though, and after talking to him for a while, he took me back to his house and fed me and let me have a shower. Yeah, I can understand a dude being pretty freaked out finding a person in his barn. Good trigger discipline on him though, or else OP would not be here to write that story. I'm glad everything ended up working out, or at least it sounds like it did. I'm assuming it did. OP is still around, so that at least is a plus. Story 4. I had been homeless for a couple weeks now and had made friends with this couple. They seemed pretty chill but had a bit of a drinking problem. Anyway, one night I was sleeping and I could hear some commotion going on. Couldn't make out who it was or what it was, until my buddy comes and sits on my sleeping bag, blood pumping out of his neck. Like, full on, every time his heart beat, it would splurt out. Not under like huge pressure, but it was pretty bad. I asked him what happened and he said he thinks his missus had cut his throat with a Stanley blade. He was so drunk he wasn't aware of how bad his injury was, and insisted I did not call an ambulance. So I called the police and they called the ambulance. I see the dude a couple days later, still homeless, scar on his neck. He's ever so grateful the nurse had told him how lucky he was. He was literally a couple of millimeters away from dying that night. Story 5. I'm a woman in my early 20s. Not my brightest decision, but I slept in my car for several weeks when I was completely out of money. Every night I parked in a small cul-de-sac. As far as we knew, the area was office only. So I didn't take anybody's parking lot, and in the morning I left. I worked a lot, so usually I slept like a log. One night though, I woke up feeling anxious for some reason. I looked up and saw a softly illuminated window right above me. Nice warm light as if from a grandma bedside lamp. I freaked out a bit and fumbled for my keys. I better sit the rest of the night out at a McDonald's or something. Then I noticed a silhouette not far away. A man was standing still and watching me. He didn't knock on my window glass, didn't try to talk or anything. He was just watching. I booked it out of that cul-de-sac real quick. The thing that freaks me out the most is not even the fact that he could assault me or rob me, but the realization that he may have watched me every other night, but I was too tired to notice that earlier. Story 6. Guy at the shelter I stayed at got stabbed in the ribs by another guy. The guy who stabbed him just walked inside and attempted to go to sleep, while the guy who's been stabbed is sitting on a bench literally spurting blood out of his side. And he goes to light a cigarette. When the staff called 911 and tried to help him, he was pushing them off, saying he was fine. This next one is a little more horrible. There was a gas station down the street. A guy paid for gas, took the hose, and doused himself in gasoline. I was smoking outside, and I remember him walking by outside the yard area with a lighter in his hand, arm fully extended out. He was very, very mentally ill, so I didn't think anything of it. I couldn't smell gas or anything like that. I continued to smoke and light another one up. About 10 minutes later, I'm inside chatting at the front desk, and a dude runs in the front door and shouts, "Give me a wet towel. A guy set himself on fire across the street." Homeless shelters aren't in good areas, so I just walked out casually thinking some idiot at the apartments across the street had set a rug on fire, and the dude who ran in was just being an idiot. I walk out the front door and sure enough, in one of the stairwells, there's flames. My thought process was basically, yep, some dumb idiots lit a rug. Oh no, the rug sat up. Me and 3 other guys ended up being the ones to put him out. It wouldn't work though. I don't know if the gas had to burn off first, but probably. I don't really remember putting him out, I just remember after. I also don't remember a smell or anything. The morbid thing I do remember is he was out and he just kept shouting, my balls are on fire, put out my balls." He died 3 days later. I was told it wasn't the first time he had done something like this. The shelter ended up sending me to therapy, and the woman was the best therapist I had ever had. I still get weird sometimes and can't really watch people on fire in movies anymore. Edit. This happened around 2011 in Kentucky, so a while back now. I've slowly been putting my life together again since then. The last time I was homeless was 2014. I'm still struggling financially, especially now, but I'm studying computer programming in my spare time. So hopefully I can get where I want to be in life. Story 7. Not what I saw, what I heard, if that counts. For a while I slept in an empty warehouse. I'm in the UK, so it was a huge Victorian building with about 6 floors. I slept on the 3rd or 4th floor, out of the way of casual intruders. Drunks and escorts used that space. And one night I heard a load of shouting and a female screaming from the ground floor. Now I was 16, a junkie, and about 120 pounds, so I wasn't in the position to do much. But I crept down the stairs to see what was happening. By the time I got there, the place was empty and the noise had stopped, so I went back upstairs. I found out the next day they found a body in the wasteland outside. Turns out the woman was an escort. They assumed her client stabbed her after a struggle and she had made a run for it before he caught her and finished the job. Always wondered if I was able to help, but I probably would have just gotten stabbed too. Story 8. I was working in a mountain town and couldn't afford rent, even with 2 jobs. One night I was wasted after work. Me and a work friend were always there by ourselves after closing, so the bar was free game. Left work at 2 a.m. and walked the hour and a half back to my tent outside of town. I was stalked by a mountain lion. I assume I looked injured and could be an easy meal. It was terrifying. I had a digital camera with me, so I just kept pointing it in the area of the ridge where I could hear it walking and flashed repeatedly. I made it home safe. Another night after closing, different campsite, I must have smelled like a huge gyro after working a double at Pitas in Paradise. Got into my sleeping bag in my tent. I was just about to doze off when I heard big crunches of a black bear sniffing me out. I was frozen with terror. The bear put his snout against the nylon inches above my head, hot steam on my face. I'd pulled the sleeping bag up to my cheeks petrified when I slapped the bear's nose above my forehead. It was an involuntary reaction and I felt stupid, but I spooked the bear and it took off. I got an apartment with some friends soon after. Story 9. After a meal at a local shelter one night, I fell asleep in a park. I hated being around there at night because some of the other homeless would rob you. One guy got knifed a week earlier and I needed to get the hell out. So I started to make my way out of the area, taking alleyways as to not attract the drunks who would throw crap and beat up and generally harass the destitute. I heard a commotion and decided to investigate, and saw this crazy animal of a man naked from the waist down on top of someone, who I assume was a woman, thrusting on top of her. Every couple of seconds he would stop to throw a punch. The woman was unconscious, completely limp, and very bloody. I yelled out to him and he turned back to look at me. I've seen a lot of bad things in my life, but the look in his eyes was beyond animalistic. He was filthy, but in the little light from the street lamps, his eyes glowed with rage and insanity. Scared the crap out of me. I was so afraid that I just took off. I ran to the nearest payphone and dialed 911. I did not go back. I have felt like such a coward and have no idea what happened to either one. I truly hope she's okay and he is dead. For what it's worth, OP, you shouldn't feel like too much of a coward. When someone's in a truly feral state like that, probably on some substance of some kind, you probably would have just put yourself in the line of danger. And by line of danger, I mean you probably would have died. And you wouldn't have helped anyone else doing that either. Because from the sounds of it, the woman, if alive, was not in a situation to run away. Or rather, a position to run away. Just whoever that man was truly a threat at that time. Story 10. Police, hands down. 17 years old, dead asleep in the back of a car belonging to my then-girlfriend's parents in a parking garage. It's freezing outside, February in Canada, 3 a.m. I'm awoken by cops dragging me from the car, ragdolling my sleepy self. I'm 6'2", 210, and yelling about the weapon. They just won't shut up about a weapon. I have no idea what they're referring to. I try to explain that I've got permission to be in the car and gave them the number for the parents, worried about waking them up. The weapon, the weapon! I asked them to show me what weapon they found, thinking maybe a parent hid a bat under the seat for protection. They pulled on the handle of a window scraper with a squeegee that was covered by a black garage bag full of clothes intended for Goodwill. I asked them how it was they felt threatened by a squeegee when I was frickin' asleep. I was urged to shut up and then driven to an all-night laundromat, and told to sleep across the super comfortable plastic chairs. Frickin' cops. Story 11. The scariest thing I saw was a man named Tony T. Apparently he had been a huge druggie for years, but had to keep a job to support his habit. He had recently received a huge settlement, over $500K, at which point he decided that he would never have to work again. He lived on the streets and smoked coke all day. The best way to describe him was Tuco from Breaking Bad. He was generous with his drugs, so people would naturally want to be around him, but he was also unpredictable and dangerous. I have tons of stories about him being crazy aggressive, but the last time I saw him, he beat a man with a pipe for dropping a tiny crack rock in the dirt. We're talking probably like $20 worth, and he probably either unalived the guy or screwed him up for life. I tried to stop him and he threatened to turn on me. I walked out, went to a phone and called my sister to come get me. She helped me get my stuff together and I never went back. That was over 30 years ago. Story 12. Honestly, the first night really outside, everything is scary. I've been homeless for about 4 months some years ago. At first I could stay with friends, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. I would actually lie to them telling them I have a place to go to. Luckily in those 4 months, I only had to really sleep outside for 2 weeks. The first scary thing was just finding where to sleep, where people can't see me and it's relatively dry. Then when I finally found places to sleep, first was in a park between some bushes, second was in a tiny playhouse in a public playground, third was under a bridge, and then again some nights in the park between bushes. I was still constantly worried about people seeing me. The other scary thing was every single sound. A car drives by slowly, are they gonna hurt me? Some drunks in the distance singing? If they see me, they're definitely going to screw around with me and be idiots. The next scary thing was the cold. I would only sleep very lightly for about 30 minutes at a time and would wake up shivering. I was 19, 1 meter 80, I think that's about 6 feet, and 95 kgs, like 190 pounds. So not a small guy, and I was scared as hell. I imagine it's so much worse for women. My best advice would be don't be an idiot and please just ask for help. Although it was extremely tempting, I didn't abuse drugs or alcohol. I didn't look homeless. I was just a big idiot thinking I can fix this by myself. I don't want to impose on people, etc. I was 19 back then. I'm 33 now and happily married and have a nice home. Story 13. I was homeless. Had warning though. Had jobs and knew it was coming and prepared. I was with my husband as well. We had a minivan we modded for survival. Put our stuff in storage and drove to his new job. Then lived rough in the van while I ran my little telecommute business. Not an MLM, don't worry. I was homeless, not stupid. And I also picked up a part-time night shift gig in retail to help guarantee a safe parking spot. 6 months of no rent, no utilities. And then we had a decent enough down payment on a house. So most millennial thing ever, basically being secretly homeless kind of on purpose. We still saw some crap though. See, we were what we call bougie homeless. Husband and I had white-collar jobs, and then I also had a blue-collar retail one as well. Eventually he got a retail one also and just didn't mention his other qualifications. Took the same weekend graveyard shifts I was, and we would stock shelves together purely to be indoors someplace with lighting and able to talk. Not changing our last names to match was a good move. One manager suspected we might have a thing for one another and was very, very startled when we later purchased a house together, and turned out to have been married for 5 years. Gym memberships for showering and exercise. Study rooms at libraries can be a great quiet place to sleep if you know how. State parks are very good for good, restful sleep on nights when the store parking lot won't cut it. The food options were pretty awful, but we eventually learned to eat mainly from the produce section or to spring for stuff like trail mixes that don't really need refrigeration. And they also had a lot of protein and stuck with you pretty well. Excessive sodium is your enemy. It makes you thirsty as hell, which leads to restroom complications. I quickly learned that I was by no means the only employee of this retail store who technically lived in the parking lot on at least an intermittent basis. Nor was I the only regular customer. The homeless population wasn't the problem at all. The general purpose poverty, lack of help for those who were trying, and lack of comfort for those who were suffering, other than the most toxic kind, that was the problem. I called an ambulance for a little kid whose mom wasn't moving in the bathroom. The kid was very calm about this. She probably just needs Narcan again. It's like how you have to plug in a phone sometimes. The mom's purse, and it was a real one, cost more than a month in the house I had left behind for this little bougie homeless adventure. Yet her shoes were some of the cheapest our store sold. I wondered from that what her story was. A drug dealer caught a kid shoplifting and marched them right back inside to return the stolen merchandise to me, and then slapped them upside the head and offered me some weed on the house for being decent about the whole thing. I declined, thumping my chest and going, asthma, but thanked him kindly for the offer. And said dealer was polite as any neighbor to me ever after. I noticed there was often a car with very gaudy wheels parked not too far from the van. And once, when I was walking back to the van late at night and some footsteps began to follow me, matching pace, I glanced behind. And to my surprise, the middle-aged white guy suddenly found himself distracted by the occupants of the car with gaudy wheels, one of whom was the pot dealer. I got into the van, told my husband to jump to the front and buckle up, and we drove to a different overnight spot. Pot dealers don't seem like bad sorts at all. Sometimes we heard screams and we would carefully look. We learned quickly never to move the car if anything shady happened in the parking lot at night while we were there. The cops would be looking for witnesses, and if they thought you saw something and were leaving, you could be detained and that would blow our cover. So on the nights we heard a crash, screams, and swearing, we would point the dash cam over, click on the auxiliary battery, then go back to sleep until morning. Then rotate the memory cards. If a cop asked, we would be like, our car was parked here, we can check the camera, and thus be able to help with plausible deniability of our homeless selves' presence. Our jobs at the store were our alibi. At any given time, I had our real schedules and fake ones I had knocked together on my laptop and printed at the library, with a little corner dog-ear code to indicate which was real and which wasn't. They keep changing it. Was perfectly believable to cops, as was disorganized paperwork, and it's a hell of a long commute. Sometimes it's easier to just get here early and have a nap. Oh, well, in that case, yeah, just stay safe, okay? That one probably knew we were bougie homeless, but bougie homeless people aren't a problem for cops. So long as they stay invisible, they aren't a problem for anyone but themselves. I'll be honest, everybody, I'm kind of at my time, like the limit for a video here, and there is a lot more to this story. So sorry, there's a lot I'm leaving out, but I figured that was an okay place to stop it at least. I don't know how I feel about the bougie homeless. It's certainly an interesting strategy for saving money. And hey, they managed to buy a house with it, which is better than a lot of people can say right now. So I guess it works. Definitely does not seem for everyone though. I don't know if I could rough it. Anyway, everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you learned some stuff and have a great day or night. I'll see you in the next one.